Hey, hope you're well. In this one, I'm going to be taking a look at one of two new cordless circular saws from British manufacturer Evolution. Just so as you know, this is a sponsored video. I'll be telling you what I like about the saw, what I don't like, what I'm on the fence about, and who I think it's aimed at. I'll also be taking a look at the new Evolution G2 guide rails and the accessories that go with them too. I'll fill you in on more of those details as we go, but let's get this saw out of the box and see what we have to work with. So inside the box you get the saw, you get a 4 amp 18 volt battery, a fan cooled charger, and there's a vacuum adapter to help with dust collection too. The saw comes with a multi-material blade as standard. Multi-material blades are Evolution's unique selling point. So out of the box this saw is capable of cutting wood, metals, composites and plastics too. So a great choice if you're working with reclaimed or recycled timber where hitting a nail won't suddenly ruin your day. Of course, if you just want to cut wood, there is also a range of specialist wood blades as well, and I've picked up a couple of these with a slightly higher tooth count so that we can compare the kind of cut, the kind of finish you can expect between them. So as I say, there are two new cordless saws. This one is the R185 CCSX, and there's also a CCS. I'll link the specifications up in the description if you want to go through them in detail. But to me, the two standout differences between them are that the CCSX, this one, is a guide rail compatible saw, whereas the CCS is a regular circular saw. But it's one with a little bit of a twist, as the CCS is capable of a whopping 57-degree bevel cut. That's more than most circular saws and track saws, and anyone who's ever needed to make those kind of extreme bevel cuts for understairs or attic storage solutions, for example, will find that very appealing, especially in a budget-friendly saw. So this CCSXLI, to give it its full name, is an 18-volt cordless saw that can be used as a standard circular saw, or it can be used on a guide rail, so a track saw but not a plunge saw. If you're not sure of the difference, then I've done a few videos on the topic. I'll link them up in the description. If you're new to track saws generally, you might want to take a look at the Tracksaw workshop series of videos. Again, links down below. The saw feels nice in the hand with a good sized die-cast aluminium base and well-placed controls for all the usual adjustments for depth of cut and angle of bevel, and clearly marked scales and indicators too. There are 2 depth marks for cuts made with the saw on the track or off, so there's no guesswork involved. The saw's not too heavy at about 4.6 kilos with the 4 amp battery fitted. That's actually a little bit lighter than the corded Festool plunge saw and a lot lighter than something like the Makita. As for cut capacity, the specifications say that the 185mm blade gets you a 59mm depth of cut at 90 degrees and 42mm at 45 degrees. That's on the track as well, so use it off the track as a regular circular saw and you'll increase those capacities by about 5mm to 64mm and 47mm respectively. So the saw's available in a couple of options. If you just wanted to use it as a circular saw with the potential for guide rail use at some future point, then you can just pick up the saw without any tracks and add them in later on as required. Or you can get the saw bundled with a pair of the new G2 1.4 meter rails at a slight discount than if you were to buy them as separate individual items. Let's talk about these new guide rails for a minute, as they represent quite a change of direction from Evolution. The original Evolution guide rails have long been the best value way to get 2 1.4 meter rails to cut a full board, but ironically that good value came at the price of compatibility, as the pattern that those original rails, the way the extrusion was formed without a upward facing T-slot on the left hand edge, for example, that pattern was different enough to cause some niggles with accessories. These new G2 guide rails change all that. They're as close to the standard Festool guide rail pattern as you'd find anywhere, and without the compatibility issues that the Makita pattern rails cause with that little anti-tipping lip. I've done an extended video about guide rail compatibility that's well worth a look if you're new to plunge saws and track saws. In fact, I'll probably have to update that video now that these rails are here. The bottom line though is that these new Evolution G2 rails are a fantastic option to have generally, and especially if you're using saws like the popular Parkside where the slightly wider than normal base on those saws really limits your options for additional guide rails. These new Evolution rails solve all those issues at a stroke, but that's not all. I highlighted the problems of joining guide rails together accurately in a recent video where I looked at the various options for doing this and found them all falling a little bit short with the tiny grub screws on the joining bars that can shake themselves loose. Well, the G2 guide rails come with a new set of joining bars that use a clever and patented set of self-centering cams to lock the bars in place. It's such a simple idea and so effective that you sort of marvel that nobody has come up with it before. Honestly, it's an absolute stroke of genius, and of course compatible not just with the new Evolution rails, but with Makita and Makita clone rails as well, like the Titan, the Triton, the Erbauer, McAllister, and so on. It's got to be said that it's a bold move from Evolution 2, as obviously the new rail profile means that they don't play nicely with the original Evolution rails. And I think that drawing a line under the old product to make something better shows a confidence that they're doing the right thing. There's a few new guide rail accessories available as well. Rail stops to limit the movement on the rail for accurate repeat cuts. There's a rail guard to stop cables and hoses snagging on the end of the rail. And there's a well-priced rail square too, all part of a well thought out system. Okay, well, enough chat. Let's get this saw on a rail and see how it cuts. There's the usual little cams on the base of the saw that snug down onto the main rib of the guide rail, and there's a helpful little notch in the cam as well that shows the mid position too. First cut is just going to be to trim the splinter guard back, and then we'll do a narrow rip just to see how the 20-tooth multi-material blade works out. Okay, so I've got to say, for a 20-tooth multi-material blade, admittedly one that is fresh out of the packet, that's actually not bad at all. I have seen far worse cuts from 20-tooth blades at a much higher price. Let's swap that blade out for a finer 40-tooth wood-cutting blade. There's a spindle lock on the saw and onboard storage for the Allen key. And then we can give this a whirl. Incidentally, the new rails have some really nice grippy material underneath. I would have no hesitation about using them without clamping them, but just because it's a new saw and a new blade and new rails, I want us to clamp them down just to make sure that there's no little movement that might affect the quality of the cut. Anyway, we've got the 40-tooth blade in there now, the fine woodworking blade. We'll give that a whirl and see how that works out. So we've got the two cuts there. That's the 20-tooth multi-material blade on the top and the 40-tooth woodworking blade, fine wood blade on the bottom. I think it goes to show how well that 20-tooth multi-material blade performs actually. But the 40-tooth cut, the cut from the 40-tooth blade is definitely better, definitely finer. A couple of little saw blade marks on there, nothing to fret about. Let's get a chunk of natural timber in here and we'll give the 24-tooth wood blade a quick run out, and then we'll have a recap of how things are going. And again, that's a pretty nice cut, considering that's 50mm, and that's straight through in a single pass on a cordless saw that's single speed, by the way. That's a very impressive cut. A couple of little sawtooth marks in there, but nothing I wouldn't expect to have on a big, thick rip cut like that. Very impressive. Okay, so let's get to the likes and the dislikes on the fence areas. I do like the size and weight of the saw. A lot of cordless saws are actually 36 volt and need 2 batteries. The single 18 volt battery really helps here, and as you'd expect, the batteries are fully compatible across all the 18 volt Evolution tools. I'm told that they're compatible with the Erbauer 18 volt system as well. I do like the soft start and the electronic brake and the brushless motor, and while it seems like a little bit of a silly thing, I do like the built-in LED too, as it really helps you to see what you're doing. I like the fact that it's cordless too. Not so long ago, the only cordless tools I had were drills and drivers. Now I've got cordless routers and a cordless table saw too. So I've got to say, I absolutely love the guide rails and the joining bars. I could probably do an entire video just about those. And I probably will need to redo my which rails work video to accommodate them. I really like the way that angling the saw over for a bevel cut keeps the cut line consistent with the guide rail splinter guard. And I really like the grippiness of the guide rails too. I know it seems like a silly thing, but not all anti-skid strips are created equal, and these are really very good. As for dislikes, well, the number one has to be dust collection or the lack of it. That's not a criticism of this saw specifically, just circular saws in general, as they don't have the enclosed blade of a plunge saw, and the single point of extraction just can't cope. If you're working outdoors, then that's obviously a lot less of a problem, but here in the workshop you'll be sweeping up a lot more often than you might like, having the air scrubber running and needing to use PPE as well. As for being on the fence, well, there's one little picky thing, and that's while the various blades performed extremely well, they all have slightly different kerfs, slightly different thicknesses to the teeth. So if you were trying to do very precise work, you'd need to have a dedicated rail to a blade, or accept that you need to retrim the splinter guard when you're changing blades. And just that curious thing as well with the specialist wood blades, they're fitted to the saw with a printed face inwards. I think if you were new to the saws or new to changing blades, something like that could catch you out. So who is this saw for? Who would benefit from the features that it offers? Well, as I say, the dust collection means it's probably not ideal if you're a workshop-based cabinet maker. But if you do most of your cutting outdoors, if your projects need mostly a circular saw with just occasional tracksaw use, and especially if you prefer cordless, then this R185 CCSXLI ticks a lot of the boxes, particularly at the budget-friendly end of the market. As for the new G2 guide rails and accessories, well, they're for absolutely everyone who has a tracksaw. I can't emphasize enough what great value those guide rails are. If you walk into almost any store with £100 in your pocket, you'd probably be walking out with one 1.4 meter guide rail. If you're lucky to get 2 fully compatible rails with a pair of clamps and a bag and those fantastic joining bars, all for 100 quid, just short of, is very, very impressive. So very well played, Evolution. I think I'll call this one done for this week though. Thanks so much for taking a look. Thank you to Evolution for letting me have early access to the saw and to the rails and accessories too. Be sure to check out the links in the description for more information. Leave a comment while you're there, hit subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Right, take care.